When you're scheduled sort of the last speaker of the day, you never quite know what to think, do you, really? I mean, if you're a humble, unassuming person, you probably think, well, you know, they probably figure everyone's will be gone by then and, you know, they'll just sort of slot you in there. If you're a self-confident, borderline arrogant person, you'll think, well, they've clearly kept the best till last to keep everyone there. I'll let you decide which one. Anyway, it's a great pleasure to be here, and it's been a fantastic day. I'm going to not sort of talk about LDLs or you know, anything like that. I'm just going to talk to you, I guess, a little bit about sort of social impact and the campaign that we've been on for the last year or so. So, I mean, as we all know, that you know, we've got some massive health problems in this country, and they've been well documented: obesity, type 2 diabetes, dental disease, fatty liver, cardiovascular disease, all sorts of chronic diseases, autoimmune diseases, and so on. And many of us believe that that nutrition plays a very important part in that. But what we have out there in our community is just a multitude of diets, and we have, you know, the low carb, high fat. Obviously, we have paleo, we have keto, we have vegetarian, vegan, we have Mediterranean, we have lots and lots of different diets. And I would argue that all we're really doing is confusing the public. I mean, the number of people that come to me and say, oh, I'm so confused about what I should be eating. You know, I used to sort of know, it was just low fat, low fat, low fat. But now, I just don't know. I'm confused. So, you know, I think that's a really common sort of scenario that in this country, that people are confused. So, a couple of years ago, 18 months ago or so, I was chatting to one of my colleagues and about this very topic, and I said, you know, I think there's too much confusion out there. It's really difficult for the average person to know now what to eat. And you know, while you know, we all know that there's a lot of factors in all these diseases. It's you know, there's sugar and there's carbohydrates and there's vegetable oils and all the things that we've heard about. But I proposed to this colleague of mine. I said, well, wouldn't it be great if we get all these people sort of pushing these different diets and lifestyles and so on, to all sort of come together and agree on one thing and try and focus on one thing. And the obvious thing was sugar, because it's the one thing that everyone agrees on. Even the dietitians agree on sugar. Amazing. So, sorry, dietitians in the room, I know you're all different, but your colleagues, all who aren't here, all agree on sugar. And while, you know, I think personally, you know, I want to tell the world about low carb and healthy fat and the evils of all the things we've talked about and so on. As soon as you mention things like fat and so on, you immediately get a lot of pushback from the medical profession, from the dietitians and so on. So my feeling was, well, let's tackle the what I call the low-hanging fructose. You know, something that's easy, well, relatively easy, and you know, if we can do that, then maybe we can have a massive impact on the health of Australians, and then that may lead then to talking about things like saturated fat and so on. So what about sugar? I mean, you know, we know that sugar doesn't just make us fat, it also makes us sick. We know that people are eating a lot of sugar. If we look at the stats, you know, the obesity and overweight figures you're pretty familiar with, but look at the too much sugar. I mean, there are 70% of Australians who are having too much sugar. Again, that's probably not a great surprise to anyone. How much sugar are we having? Well, there's a lot of debate as to how much people are eating. The general consensus is that the average Australian is having sort of 14, 15, 16 teaspoons of added sugar a day. I like talking about teaspoons rather than grams, because teaspoons we can all identify with what a teaspoon is. Grams is pretty confusing. So it's about 14 to 16 teaspoons of added sugar a day. That's not counting the natural sugars in fruit and dairy. We're talking about added sugars. In teenagers, it's far worse. You can see there that the top 10% of teenagers are having an average of 38 teaspoons a day. And this is sort of a complicated thing, but if you look here, it's basically the average daily intake of added sugars. The yellow is the median intake, and it's grams over on the left there. So you can see there that there's a wide variety, and there are a lot of people having massive amounts of sugar, and it certainly peaks in those sort of teenage and early 20s sort of time. As I said, teenage boys in particular are the big targets. It's pretty scary when you see the amount of soft drink that is. Now this is 2011. I suspect it's come down a little bit since then, but probably not much. 75 litres a year, 7.5 kilograms of sugar each year, just in soft drinks alone. Now, I'm not just trying to pick on Coke, but that's the way it is. As we know, sugar is everywhere. You've only got to look. Look at the. You go to one of those service station when you're filling up your petrol. You go into the supermarket or mini market that they have there. I mean, they're amazing places. They are the unhealthiest places in the country, and all you get there is sugar drinks, sugar cereals. Really, we shouldn't call these cereal. I mean, there's more sugar than cereal in these things. This is a couple of years old. This data now, but these are the top 5 selling products in Woolworths for the year. Okay, excluding fresh fruit and vegetables and meat and alcohol, obviously. I don't quite know how milk pops in there, but the others are all 4 different types of Coca-Cola. Are 4 of the top 5 selling items in our supermarkets. It's amazing. And as we know, in every bottle of Coke or a soft drink, you're getting a massive amount of sugar. You would not even think about having that amount of sugar just by itself, and yet people don't think twice about having it in their soft drinks. And again, apologies to my friends at Coca-Cola, but they're just the most obvious victims. And look, it's not altogether surprising that we have so much problems with our diet and what we're eating, because there's a massive amount of advertising. There's a lot of money to be made out of sugar, and a lot of that 1.75 billion is spent promoting products that are full of sugar. We mentioned cereals before. They're very clever the way they've marketed cereals. I mean, my parents' generation, your grandparents' generation probably, because I'm pretty old, they'd have porridge or eggs and bacon for breakfast. And somehow in the space of a couple of generations, these brilliant marketers really have convinced us all that our children, us and our children in particular, should basically be having sugar for breakfast. And they do it by very clever means with toys and all the sort of techniques that they use. And so when we've fallen for it, hook, line, sinker. Amazing, it's scary. As you know, it's not just in soft drinks, even in fruit drinks, fruit juice, amazing amount of sugar. For years, I must admit, I had my fruit juice every day and I thought I was being healthy. And I fed my kid, the first drink my kids had, when they were weaned was apple juice. And, they all, for some reason, still love apple juice. And I feel horrendously guilty, but my counsellor and I are working through it. It's okay. I've just become a grandfather, and this poor grandson of mine, I'm going to be the food police on him. He's not going to get a bit of fruit juice or anything near him. So there we go. So we've got a massive issue with fruit juice, and interesting, which I didn't realise, that Australia and New Zealand are the highest fruit juice consuming countries in the world. As I mentioned before, sugar is everywhere, and a lot of places that I think we all realise that it's in soft drinks and cereals and so on. But sugar's in the vast majority of packaged foods. 3/4 of packaged foods contain sugar. It's not always called sugar, because they're not that silly. They're much smarter than we are. They'll disguise the sugar in some other name. And here's just a token sample of 56 names of sugar. And sugar's in all sorts of things that we didn't realise. yogurt and energy bars and so on. You know, energy bars, protein bars. You know, all full of sugar. Okay, let's have a little bit of audience participation. Okay, I've got a quiz for you. I got home, well, I opened the fridge one day over summer and this was in the fridge. My kids had had a barbecue the day before and someone had left this bottle of Master Foods barbecue sauce. 930 ml, big bottle, you've all seen it, you know, pretty popular sort of thing. Okay, so I got curious and I had a look at the label and worked out how much sugar was in that bottle. Okay, so let's get you guessing. How many people think there were 20 teaspoons of sugar in that bottle?
Are you going higher?
I'm going higher. Yep. At least 20. 30. 40. 50. Oh, you're all clever, aren't you? Okay, 125 teaspoons. Okay, so 497 grams to be precise. So basically a whole 500 gram pack of sugar is in that 930 ml bottle. So, as one of my kids' friends said when I told them that, they said, "Oh, no wonder it tastes so good." What can you do? Okay, let's. So, how much sugar should we be eating? Well, the American Heart Association came out last year, and they recommended figures of 9 and 6 teaspoons of sugar of added sugar per day as a maximum. And as I said before, the same slide as before, but the World Health Organization has recommended, they've said certainly less than 12, so less than 10% of your caloric intake, so which is 12 teaspoons, and ideally 5% of caloric intake, which is 6 teaspoons. So, you know, we're looking around the 6 to 8 teaspoons of added sugar is certainly as much as we should be having. And with kids, same sort of thing, 6 teaspoons of added sugar a day is recommended. And as we saw before from those figures, we're way over that amount at the moment. So, you know, we should basically be halving our amount of sugar. Okay, so if we're going to halve our sugar, I figured it was time to try and do something about it. And in the words of two great John Kennedys, things do not happen, things are made to happen. So there's no point waiting around for someone else to do something. It's time to do it yourself. And in the words of the other far more famous John Kennedy, sorry Nina and Dawn, the great Hawthorn football coach, who at three-quarter time one day just threw up his hands and said, "Just do something." So I decided it was time to just do something. And we created SugarByHalf. And so the aim of SugarByHalf is a campaign that with the aim of reducing the amount of added sugar taken in by the average Australian by a half. So SugarByHalf, pretty clever name, hey? That's been about my only contribution so far. But anyway, so SugarByHalf is the name. Now look, there's been a lot of talk about sugar. You know, we're certainly not pretending that we're the only people talking about sugar by any means. There's a lot of stuff out there. You know, Damon's film is absolutely fantastic and should be compulsory viewing for every family. And you know, there's Jamie Oliver's talking sugar. Lots of people are talking sugar. But so we thought we'd just jump on the bandwagon. I'm good at that. So, but you know, we've christened the term sugardemic. We believe we're being crippled by a sugardemic. Great term, eh? Not me, no. Was our lawyer. So, you know, he did a good job on that. But it's such a good term, I'm thinking of pretending it was me. So, you know, this sugardemic is a disaster for our country. And so that's what we're trying to tackle. Our mission is to help families cut down on their added sugar and create a healthier world for our kids. You know, we haven't created a very healthy world for ourselves. Let's do one for our kids. So this is about us, our vision, our mission. You've got to have that sort of stuff. This is who we are. This is our group. We've got a bunch of doctors. We've got lawyers. We've got scientists. We've got marketing people. We've got media people. It's a great group. Sort of came together by all sorts of ways. but it's great fun. We have one of the things that I said right at the start of this campaign is if we're already giving up our time and putting a lot of effort into this, we've got to have fun. And we have a lot of laughs and we have some nice meals, and it's great. So what's this campaign sort of doing? Okay, so I sort of look at it 3 different areas that we're trying to campaign. The first is awareness, advocacy, and community. Let's just quickly tell you what sort of we've been doing. So from an awareness point of view, you know, the good thing about awareness these days is it's a lot easier to make people aware of you than it used to be. I mean, with social media and the internet and so on. So we've got our website, we're active on social media, we've had a launch and so on. So let me tell you a little bit about those. Our website, SugarByHalf.com, it's got lots of good stuff on it. It's got some good sugar swaps. It's got lots of information for families and so on. We had a launch almost exactly 12 months ago on World Obesity Day on the 11th of October 2016. And we decided that was a good day to launch our campaign. So we had a big sort of, well, as much as we could, a bit of a publicity campaign. We managed to get support from lots of people in this room who tweeted for us very kindly. So that was the start, I guess, of our campaign. Fortunately, we had a few ambassadors, one of whom was Shane Watson, who I knew obviously through cricket, who was a big advocate of this, as Marianne said before. He's helped us out before, both in South Africa with Donal O'Neill up at the top there and Tim Noakes, and he featured in one of Marianne's documentaries in her previous job. So Shane was terrific. He helped us out and he got us onto the Alan Jones show. Not someone whose politics I particularly agree with, but he's one of us. He's lost a whole lot of weight. He lost about 25 kilograms by going on to a low carb diet. So I'm prepared to embrace anyone who does that. Pity about the tie and the Harry high pants, but anyway, that's all right. He's a great man. Alan and I, we're like that. But look, we got lots of publicity, lots of media attention, media articles, which was great. Now, the marketing people on our committee told me that, well, the way we're going to launch this is do a Facebook Live event. And I said, yeah, sure. You know, I had absolutely no idea what a Facebook Live event was. I knew what Facebook is, but anyway, so to cut a long story short, we set up a Facebook Live event. We went into the Facebook headquarters in Sydney. We arranged for a whole lot of people to come and do little segments, and we filmed them, and it was great fun. We had cooking demonstrations. We had all sorts of people in there. Damon was in there. Commando Steve, my good buddy from The Biggest Loser. Peter Fitzsimon's here, these red bandana and all. So it was a great way to sort of kick things off. So that was a really good start, and we got lots of social media from that. And we've continued to be pretty active on social media. Those of you who follow us would know that a couple of times a week we'll put something out there, draw attention to interesting articles in the media somewhere, or and so on. We've also get occasional media stuff. Some of you may have seen my article in the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age last week under the Ask an Expert, fat-free or sugar-free, the verdict, and that's been pretty popular. We also put out a weekly sugar news, so you can access that, and it's got all the different media mentions of the sugar campaign every week. So that's a lot of people find that very interesting. So that's our sort of awareness. So again, it's not easy. It's not easy getting publicity, but we've got to keep chipping away and just trying to make people more aware of this issue of sugar, both for their own benefit, but also the more people who are aware of it, they then drive policy. They educate their doctors. They put pressure on politicians to do things about that. So the next thing is advocacy. And there are lots of things I think we all agree that need to be done from a government policy point of view. We need to sort out the obesity guide, the guidelines. We need to get a better retail environment, a bit of marketing, food labelling, and so on. So this is a group called the Obesity Policy Coalition, or now been called the Australian Chronic Disease Prevention Alliance. So we're working with different people. We realise we don't have the capacity to sort of have a massive influence on government, but we're working with all these other groups. Here we are, right down here, so not forgotten, with a whole lot of other groups to try and influence government policy. And that might be, this is the tipping the scale. Some of you might have read about 2 weeks ago. This was launched in Melbourne, the Obesity Policy Coalition, and they have different policies that they're advocating for government to tackle obesity. And certainly some of them come under our sort of thing. So food labelling is one. Obviously, we're trying to improve food labelling, warning signs. So a soda tax or a sugar tax, there's been a lot of talk about that. As most of you know, there are a number of countries around the world, a number of cities in the US that have adopted a sugar tax. Mexico is probably the most well known, with good reason, because they actually had the highest intake of sugar of any country in the world. Basically, kids in Mexico are weaned from the breast onto Coca-Cola, and they had a massive intake. But it's been quite effective there, and that's their first year of action. When it so it's clear that that sugar tax would be one of a whole range of things that would be very helpful. And this was the sort of some of the publicity that we got a couple of weeks ago with this launch. The media, of the 8 things, the media latched onto the sugar tax as sort of the sexiest one, I guess, to talk about. And we were happy with that. That was at least it got us some publicity. And our wonderful leaders in this country responded magnificently to that, to all that publicity, and said. It's bonkers mad. Well, I wonder who's bonkers mad. Our wonderful friend. Now, the reality is, unfortunately, that this government is never going to bring in a sugar tax. We know that. Because the National Party have 2 seats in Queensland that are dependent on the sugar farmers' vote, and that's going to stop the other 25 million people in this country getting healthier. But that's important. Good on you, Barnaby. But we've got to keep chipping away, and there may be a change of government that might make that a little bit easier. But we've got some very powerful enemies. You just saw an example of that in government, and there's a lot of parallels between the sugar campaign and the tobacco campaign, and people are calling sugar the new tobacco. And as anyone who remembers that campaign would know, it really took about 20 years from the time when there was some evidence started to be produced that tobacco is dangerous, and the tobacco companies managed to sort of squash that for 20 years, and finally things won out, and as a result, we're all a lot healthier. And let's hope that something similar is going to happen with sugar, and we've got to learn the lessons that we learnt from that tobacco campaign, and we've got to realise that our enemies are not particularly nice, and they really couldn't give a rat's about your health. All they're interested in is making money, and they've got a lot of money to spend to make sure that they win. So we've got a huge challenge ahead of us. And there are lots of very powerful people. I mean, just picking on again, Coke as one example, they're very clever. They fund sport, and they fund things that are associated with health. They're trying to convince us all that it's all just a matter of doing more exercise and we'll all be healthy. Very clever. But hopefully, it's interesting. For the first time, sales of Coca-Cola are starting to go down. And slowly, I think the message is getting out there. And Coke, being the clever people that they are now pushing themselves as the big bottled water people rather than soft drinks. So that's sort of the advocacy side of our campaign. The third part of it is community. And we've sort of realised that there's only a limited amount that you can do from the top down. As we've said, governments are very resistant to change. There are a lot of very powerful institutions preventing that. But what we feel is the way to go is to really get community involvement and get ourselves out into the community. And we've been doing this for the last few months, and it's very exciting. We've teamed up with the Global Obesity Centre, GLOBE, who are a World Health Organization funded body at Deakin University in Geelong in Victoria, and they have got a very exciting program to tackle childhood obesity. And we have now into a joint venture with them. We're providing some of the funding and the marketing and the media and the programs. They're providing the research basis, and we've been doing some work with them. There's a guy called Stephen Allender who is an outstanding, very, very clever man, professor and head of that obesity centre. So we've gone into partnership with them. And basically what that is doing is that we go, or a community comes to them and says, we want to do something about childhood obesity. Stephen then brings in all the community leaders and then sits them down for a couple of hours, talks about sort of systems thinking about the way the multi-pronged attack to tackle something like obesity. They then go back to their community, discuss the various options with their community, come back and say, we want to do, these 10 different projects in our community, and it might be removing sugar-sweetened drinks from sporting canteens, or it might be having a drop-off zone around schools of 800 metres, so kids have to walk to the 800 metres to school, and the big kids take the little kids, and that sort of stuff. So all those little sort of community-based ideas. And what the university is doing is that they are then going in and measuring the height and weight of these kids every 2 years. So in years 2, 4 and 6, they get measured. And it's a very impressive program, and despite the fact that no nation has lowered their obesity rate in the last 33 years, I'm quite excited that this program can help do that. We've got some pilot data from 1 or 2 communities in Western Victoria that shows quite a dramatic reduction. I'm not allowed to sort of give the specifics because it hasn't been published yet, but quite a dramatic reduction in the rate of childhood obesity with these community-based programs. So that's sort of one area that we're focusing a lot on at the moment. I'm in the process of talking to the major private health funds as well as the Victorian government about funding this project, and that's just another exciting way of which we might be able to tackle this problem that we've got. So that's really where we're at. We've been going, as I said, for 12 months this week. I feel frustrated that we haven't got as far as I would have liked. Other people tell me that it's amazing how much profile we've got and publicity we've got, so maybe we're not doing too badly. But look, there is some progress in this country about sugar. I think more and more people are realising that sugar is bad. We see things like sugary drinks being pulled from New South Wales hospitals. There's juice being banned in nurseries. There's the soft drinks industry being pressured to do things. So slowly but surely there are a few things that are happening. And I think people are starting to get the idea, maybe not all the medical profession, but things like the World Health Organization came out recently and said that 2/3 of all disease worldwide will be the result of lifestyle choices. And we're talking about nutrition and exercise and things like that. 2/3. And yet, is 2/3 of the medical budget on that? 2/3 of 1% maybe, if we're lucky. So it's slowly but surely we're getting there. So from a personal point of view, I'm very passionate about it. I've spent the last 5 years single-handedly winning the World Cup for my country and showing a remarkable ability to jump into the centre of photos, and it takes years of practice. That it's but no, seriously, I've just recently given up my job with them, and I won't be single-handedly winning back the Ashes this summer. So, don't put your money on it. But I've decided to spend the rest of my working time anyway on this campaign and trying to, instead of looking after the health of 11 Australians, try the other 24 million. Thanks very much.